Okay, so we're finishing up C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves. And in this last chapter, Lewis talks about what he thinks is that form of love which should take priority in our lives. Because in some metaphysical sense, he thinks that this love is temporally and ontologically prior to the other kinds of love. But we'll get into that in a second. I want to start by doing a little bit of a recap. We've talked about a few different kinds of love in this book, right? There were likings and loves for the subhuman, as he called them. You know, feeling a certain way about your pet, or an idea, or a place, or a thing. There was affection, friendship, and eros that we looked at, right? And Lewis linked all of these different kinds of love to those Greek words that we saw in the first book we looked at in this class. He calls all of these natural loves because there is something, well, literally biological, natural about them, right? There are certain mechanisms within us that produce feelings associated with these loves, cause us to, act them out. But he says that these loves are not self-sufficient, right? We can get them twisted, or rather they can get us twisted, yeah? We saw in the case of Mrs. Fidget how affection can get twisted. Somebody can live and work their whole life for their family, and actually that causes their family to build resentment for them, right? Because they're doing all these things they don't want them to do. They're not actually helping, so on and so forth. In cases of friendship, Lewis said that friendship is intrinsically a little bit rebellious, right? Friendship kind of involves building a metaphorical fence around you and the people that you are associating with. It can become club-like. And it can cause you to do some bad things. Friendship does not always make people better. Good people can be friends, bad people can be friends, right? It can be a good if utilized properly, but it can also motivate bad things. And it can produce a sense of smugness and superiority, right? And then there's eros. Well, we talked a lot about this one. Erotic love, or that passionate longing that you feel for a particular person. If you've ever been in love, you know what this feels like, how strong and intense it can be. But we know from all the great works of literature, music, movies, maybe your own personal lives, that this kind of love can motivate some crazy things, right? It can turn into obsession. It can inspire murder, theft, right? Stalkery behavior maybe, right? So none of these loves by themselves are going to allow us to live a fulfilled life. Lewis says this because if we let them go their own way, they'll take us over in these different ways. They'll turn demonic. He says, left unchecked, they turn into demons. They demand a lot of us, and they inspire great and terrible thought, speech, and action. To quote him, he says, by themselves, these loves, quote, cannot remain themselves and do what they promise to do. Instead, they turn sour on us. Thus, what he's going to argue in this last chapter is that we must submit these natural loves to another kind of love. Just as Plato argues in the Republic that we need to submit our desires and our instincts to reason, Lewis thinks that we need to cultivate and maintain a certain hierarchy of loves. Okay? The love that he thinks should be at the top that should rule over all the other loves that we're going to talk about today is charity. And all these other loves need to be limited and ruled by charity in order for our lives to go well, in order for us to not be swept away and consumed by these feelings and actions. Charity is higher and better because, as we'll see, he thinks it is the form of love that not only produced the universe, but it's also the form of love that is the only one fitting to guide and rule over the other ones. Because there's something about it that is pure. There's something about it that is near to who God is in his essence. He talks about this on pages 164 and 165. A little bit more than halfway down the page on 164. When God planted a garden, he set a man over it and set the man under himself. When he planted the garden of our nature and caused the flowering, fruiting loves to grow there, the natural loves, he set our will to dress them. Compared with them, it is dry and cold. And unless his grace comes down like the rain and the sunshine, we shall use this tool to little purpose. But its laborious and largely negative services are indispensable. If they were needed when the garden was still paradisal, how much more now when the soil has gone sour and the worst weeds seem to thrive on it best? But heaven forbid we should work in the spirit of prigs and stoics. While we hack and prune, we know very well that what we are hacking and pruning is big with a splendor and vitality which our rational will can never of itself have supplied. To liberate that splendor, to let it become fully what it is trying to be, to have tall trees instead of scrubby tangles, and sweet apples instead of crabs, is part of our purpose. So what he's saying here is that these natural loves that grow within us, that have biological mechanisms, that are associated with our flesh and blood, our sex, our eroticism, all these things, affection, friendship, eros, they need to be guided and ruled. Because if they are not, we're going to make a mess of things. And we're going to be swept up, consumed, led down some dangerous paths. This is the overarching view that he offers of charity, the love that is supposed to rule and guide over these things.
Yeah, to me that rings very true. And I think you get to see it a lot, especially in the past when everybody was oriented towards making things for God, or just having that sort of higher power in mind whenever they were doing something. They worked a lot harder, they took a lot more care of things than they do today. Or like everybody just, like if you just look at the architecture that people are building today, it's nowhere near as good.
You don't think it's as cool or as impressive or...
Yeah, they just slap up some glass and like, this is so cool. And it's like, no, it's just glass that you can make cheaply and just kind of looks nice, but there's no care in any of it.
So the general idea is this, which I think you're echoing in your statement. Lewis thinks that if we're going to lead an earthly and spiritually fulfilled life, that involves walking in some sense according to God's will. That's what this love does. This love, operating according to this love, living it out, being charitable, is associated with doing that. Living according to the purpose and will that God has deigned for us. This form of love that he talks about in this chapter, charity, he likens to the Greek word agape. And this love is often used to translate the word love in the Bible, agape, especially in like Paul's letters and things. This is what Lewis calls love in the Christian sense. In other words, this love is unconditional, freely given. What we might call grace. It doesn't depend on the object of our love. It doesn't depend on whether or not that thing is good to us, what we think about it. Charity is unconditional love that is freely given. It's a gift. It is not fulfilling one end of a contract. It is a gift. To discuss why he hasn't talked about it up until this point, he tries to provide some sort of story for why he's written the book the way that he has. One of the central themes of this chapter is that the natural loves that we have been looking at, affection, eros, and friendship, are rivals to the love of God. The love that God has for us and the love that we are supposed to have for Him. Lewis says that there are two reasons why he has not spoken much about this rivalry. For starters, what he was trying to do in this book is provide us some reasons and arguments that these loves are not self-sufficient, that are not just based on Christian theology. Okay? He's trying to provide a good general argument for people. He's trying to persuade them of something that doesn't involve them presuming the Christian worldview. He's trying to appeal to a secular audience. He doesn't think that describing all of this love stuff in terms of the Christian worldview from the get-go is the right place to start for most people. Because he says what we tend to need most help with is first loving others appropriately. Not wrestling over loving God more than others. Ooh, this marker's good. Love it. That is, when he was laying out his argument for the insufficiency of these loves, how they can harm us, why love of God is better and should take up more of our life, the reason why he goes on this kind of long-winded secular analysis is because what we tend to struggle with, more so than anything else, is properly loving others. Only after have we figured that out should we start worrying about whether we love God more than others and wrestling with that problem. Lewis is going to argue that not only do we need to have some sort of hierarchy of loves, but we need to have a hierarchy in regards to who we love. Who should we place at the top of our hierarchy? Who should we love most? What do you think he's going to say?
God.
Exactly, God, right? And then under that, maybe we have like family and friends, and then maybe other people. Maybe something like that. And maybe even underneath that or in here, I'm not sure, is love of the self. Lewis thinks this because he has bought into the Christian story, the Christian worldview. He says that, well, he believes that God created this whole universe, that God did so through love, that love is in some sense responsible for us all being here. And because he's God, because he's done all this stuff for us, he's made our lives possible, he's made our salvation possible, he's fundamentally changed our eternal trajectory, it only makes sense and it's appropriate for us to love him above all else. Our Creator, our Father, our Savior.
I think this is where I would disagree in a sense. Like, I think if you're going to say God is all powerful, all knowing, all loving, I would think someone like that wouldn't want to be worshipped. I think he just is there to facilitate everything and wants us to kind of learn and grow. But I think that's where a lot of religions try to manipulate people. I don't think God wants your worship.
Okay. Yeah, he would certainly say God doesn't need anything. Certainly doesn't need anything that we can or should give him. Right? The perspective that he's coming at it from is we should want to love God more than anything else because that's appropriate, because of what he's done for us. So he would say, yeah, God doesn't need our love. But I think he would say that God, like a parent, enjoys the love of his children. You know, as a parent, you don't perhaps need the love and praise of your kid, but it makes you happy to know that your kid loves you, right?
Yeah, I think God wants the best out of you and wants you to try your hardest and be virtuous, be good to people, but I don't think he really cares or like needs your love or just kind of expects you to be like, oh, well, what does God really want me to do, you know?
Okay.
I think it's more like try your hardest, learn the lessons you can, you know, and, you know, keep God in mind, but don't just worship him and like just have this blind, oh, well, people said this about God, so I have to do this, you know.
Oh yeah, sure. Lewis is he's not going to say you should just follow whatever Christians tell you to do. Yeah, he's going to say like, look, the Christian church has done and said some stupid shit. Like, if you actually want to look to figure out how you should be living, go to the Bible. You know, read that thing.
And I think that like, I guess kind of the issue about like speaking about religion generally is that like C.S. Lewis, this guy right here, he's Christian.
Yep.
Not everyone's Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Even people who do passionately and vehemently believe in God, not everyone has the same God or the same idea of God. And so like, I think that humans have a way of soiling and manipulating things. And I think that like, while the principles fundamentally that he is trying to explain are valuable, I think that like, it's so like religion is something that's so highly up for interpretation that it's like difficult to actually set your values around religion because they aren't concrete values. Like I feel like
Okay.
fluctuating kind of things, if that makes sense at all. And so like that's where I would say that I don't think that like God or religion should be someone's like number one moral compass. I think it should be like based on like your experiences and your interactions with other people, and like
It should be more grounded.
it should be more grounded.
Okay.
Yeah. Instead of like obviously this is a philosophy class, right? So you're gonna think about things philosophically, but I think that like a truly like good and loving person, thinks about the physical and the metaphorical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me lay out his view for you and see if you think it's cool, or if it meshes well with the values that you think are the right ones and the behaviors that you think are good. Because you might disagree from the get-go with his Christian worldview, but you might, when we get into it a little bit, think, actually what he says here is kind of cool, even if I disagree with some of the specifics.
I just want to say, like, one last thing, this on like the whole, like, God wanting you to worship him. I would just say to that, like, whenever I've been in a place of like knowledge or power, I usually want to teach people, like, ask them for their praise or approval. And I think God would act the same way.
Well, Lewis is going to say that God gave us free will for a reason. He's going to say, yeah, God doesn't want mindless automatons. Just as a parent, you don't want your kid to be programmed to love you, right? You want them to listen to you and do what's right for them and do what's best for them of their own free will, and love you of their own free will. So I think there's something in there that you and Lewis would agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with the free will. Like, it's not love if you're being forced to do it.
Right. That's kind of one of the central characteristics of this love that he thinks is the grandest and best, and that we should orient our lives around. It isn't love that is compelled. It's not love that is born from some need. It's love that is freely and unconditionally given. So let's see if y'all think that is the highest and best form here. I just wanted to also put on the board before I forgot that the other reason why Lewis has gone through this long, drawn-out, tangential discussion, and he didn't start with the Christian worldview at the beginning of the book, is because he thinks that natural love's self-proclaimed divinity is easily refuted without invoking the Christian worldview. And it seems like a lot of you agreed with this already, right? You all agreed that look at how all these loves can turn bad and sour, right? They're not perfect. They're not gods that should be worshipped, right? I take it y'all don't believe affection is a god that should be worshipped, right? Or should have the place of a god in your mind. Do you? Okay, well then Lewis has done his job, right? He's done a good job, probably, of convincing you that these loves alone are not good enough to regulate themselves. Something else needs to come in from the outside to help regulate these things for the good of human life and the good of human relationships. He considers one view that actually came from a Christian saint in these pages. St. Augustine. St. Augustine suggested that we should only love God. That is the only thing in our lives that we should love. We shouldn't worry about loving other people or loving our neighbors or loving a country. Why? His reasoning was that if we love things that are temporal, that are not eternal, that's going to cause us heartache and disappointment. Because people will betray you, and people will die, and your country will do things that you're not proud of. So, Lewis says what St. Augustine seems to imply in his writings is that we should only have love for God and nothing else. Why? If we have love for other things, that's going to lead to heartache and suffering for us. Of course, if you read this chapter, you'll know that Lewis disagrees with this idea. Okay? He talks about this on page 169. Let me read for you a section. He says, I actually start on the top of 168. Of course, what Augustine provides us is excellent common sense. Don't put your goods in a leaky vessel. Don't spend too much on a house you may be turned out of. And there is no man alive who responds more naturally than I to such canny maxims. I am a safety-first creature. Of all arguments against love, none makes so strong an appeal to my nature as, careful, this might lead you to suffering. To my nature, to my temperament, yes, not to my conscience. When I respond to that appeal, I seem to myself to be 1,000 miles away from Christ. If I am sure of anything, I am sure that his teaching was never meant to confirm my congenital preference for safe investments and limited liabilities. I doubt whether there is anything in me that pleases him less. And who could conceivably begin to love God on such a prudential ground? Because the security is better. Who could even include it among the grounds for loving? Would you choose a wife or a friend? If it comes to that, would you choose a dog in this spirit? Just because it's a good idea, because you won't get hurt? One must be outside the world of love, of all loves, before one thus calculates. Eros, lawless Eros, preferring the beloved to happiness, is more like love himself than this. I think that this passage in the Confessions is less a part of St. Augustine's Christendom than a hangover from the high-minded pagan philosophies in which he grew up. It is closer to Stoic apathy or Neoplatonic mysticism than to charity. We follow one who wept over Jerusalem and at the grave of Lazarus, and, loving all, yet had one disciple whom in a special sense he loved. This being John, of course. St. Paul has a higher authority with us than St. Augustine. St. Paul, who shows no sign that he would not have suffered like a man, and no feeling that he ought not so to have suffered if Epaphroditus had died. Even if it were granted that insurances against heartbreak were our highest wisdom, does God himself offer them? Apparently not. Christ comes at last to say, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" There is no escape along the lines St. Augustine suggests, nor along any other lines. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers and perturbations of love is hell. So he disagrees with this idea that We shouldn't direct our love to others, to things on earth, to things in this realm. All love involves vulnerability. Failing to love at all risks living a life that isn't even human. It risks living a life that, well, damns us to apathy and stoicism and unhappiness, I think. So in terms of love, there is no safe investment. We would be better off risking our hearts in friendship, affection, eros, than never having loved at all, I think is what he's trying to say. What do you think? Do you agree with him?
Yeah.
Why?
I believe that all love does involve vulnerability. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I feel like we can't not love.
Okay.
I feel like it's just not possible. On some level, you love something. Whether it's someone or something or whatever.
So we can't escape it.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say, like Lewis, that love is good?
Yeah.
Like it is something we should do? Like even if it hurts sometimes? Yeah? It outweighs the hurt and the risk, you think? All love or only certain kinds of love?
All love, I think. Truthfully.
You certainly acted the way that Lewis is suggesting insofar as you've been in love, right? You've thrown caution to the wind. You've risked. You've had your heart broken. Would you rather never have been in that relationship at all? Okay, so y'all are agreeing with Lewis on this point, you think?
Absolutely.
What is particularly interesting is, I think what he's implying here is that if we lived any other way, we wouldn't properly be human. What do you think about that? Is there something... Is this central to like the human experience?
I do think so, because even when you look at it from a scientific standpoint, let's say, humans are proven to be social creatures.
Right.
Humans need other humans. Like, that is just a fact. Like, if you are isolated for more than like 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever, it's shown to have damages to your psyche. And the longer that you go without like interaction with others, the like more that it hurts you. Like, we cannot be isolated, like even on a biological level, let alone like a more like physical, spiritual level, or a mental, spiritual level.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, I absolutely agree that it's like very intrinsically human to love and to have community and to be connected, whether it's through one another or a higher power or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Now this is where another question arises. Because Lewis would agree, he would say it's natural to the human experience to love and to experience heartbreak and to risk and be vulnerable. But he doesn't think that this feature of humanity is a cosmic accident. This is where his Christian worldview comes in. See, the contemporary scientific explanation, the evolutionary explanation, basically says the traits that we have are contingent in the kind of environments that our ancestors operated in. Maybe our existence itself is a cosmic accident, right? Maybe there's no reason for us to be here. There's no reason that we have any trait. That's just how evolution shaked out, right? So this desire for love and this need to be social and to love is just like an evolutionary accident of our history. It wasn't planned, it wasn't created in us. Lewis is going to say no. There is a reason that we love. This isn't an accidental feature of what it means to be human. In some sense, because we were created in the image of God, that means that we have certain features, certain characteristics that were meant to be a part of who we are. Maybe that includes consciousness or free will, whatever you think being made in the image of God means. One of the things that it means, at least for Lewis, is this. I don't want to say drive, but drive to love. This act of loving, this behavior, these feelings of love. So what he's going to say is, there's a reason why we love. It's not accidental. It's good to love. And what he's going to provide for us in this chapter is, well, the proper guidelines on how we utilize that capacity. What it means to love properly. What our hierarchy of loves should look like. As being children of God, who are created in His image, who are saved by His Son, he says that we are called to love God. First and foremost, we got to put God at the top of our love hierarchy. And at the end of the day, our will should serve God above everything else. Not because God needs this, not because there's a gaping wound in God's heart that we need to fill with our love and praise. No, God doesn't need anything from us. This is just the appropriate spiritual, existential, moral response to the features of our creation and our lives after everything that He's done for us. And he says what it means to love God first and foremost. What it means to put Him at the top of our love hierarchy is to serve Him ultimately in what we do. There we go. Can y'all read this? I know I'm kind of doing cursive. Ultimately, our will should be aligned with God's will. That doesn't mean that we don't look out for others. It doesn't mean we don't look out for ourselves. We do. But gratifying our own desires or gratifying other people's desires shouldn't be our top priority, he says. Our top priority should be to serve God. And in order to explain this, he talks about what the Bible means when it says that we should hate people or hate our enemies. The Bible is full of verses that say things like, you cannot serve two masters. If you try to do so, you will love one and hate the other. Lewis thinks when the Bible uses this word hate, it doesn't mean you have a negative view. It doesn't mean you have a negative feeling. what it's trying to express is that your will is not aligned with the thing, or the institution, or the person. Thus, what it means, according to the Bible, to hate, he says, means to turn our face against. Thus, to love means to turn our face towards. Thus, when the Bible says that we should hate the devil, perhaps, or we should hate sin, it's not saying you should be mean and cruel and have a negative view and feel these feelings. No, it's talking about at what are you oriented? How are you acting in your life? And Lewis says, to love God means ultimately to be aligned with His will. There might be some nice feelings associated with that, but it has to do with our actions and our heart posture or our orientation, if that makes sense. He says that we should love, turn our face towards God, because God is the source of love. God is the source of the universe. God is what provides our capacities and our opportunities in life. There are a whole bunch of reasons that our lives should revolve around God. Okay? Talks about this on pages 176 through 178. This is a little longer passage, but I think there's some beauty in here. Let's see what y'all think. Top of 176, starting with God who. God, who needs nothing, loves into existence wholly superfluous creatures, in order that He may love and perfect them. That's why we're here. He creates the universe, already foreseeing, or should we say seeing, there are no tenses in God, the buzzing cloud of flies about the cross, the flayed back pressed against the uneven stake, the nails driven through the mesial nerves, the repeated incipient suffocation as the body droops, the repeated torture of back and arms, as it is time after time, for breath's sake, hitched up. If I may dare the biological image, God is a host who deliberately creates His own parasites, causes us to be that we may exploit and take advantage of Him. Herein is love. This is the diagram of love Himself, the inventor of all loves. God, as creator of nature, implants in us both gift loves and need loves. The gift loves are natural images of Himself, proximities to Him by resemblance, which are not necessarily, and in all men, proximities of approach. A devoted mother, a beneficent ruler or teacher may give and give, continually exhibiting the likeness without making the approach. The need loves, so far as I've been able to see, have no resemblance to the love which God is. They are rather correlatives, opposites. Not as evil is the opposite of good, of course, but as the form of the blancmange, I don't know that word, is an opposite to the form of the mold. But in addition to these natural loves, God can bestow a far better gift. Or rather, since our minds must divide and pigeonhole, two gifts. He communicates to men a share of His own gift love. This is different from the gift loves He has built into our nature. These never quite seek simply the good of the loved object for the object's own sake. They are biased in favor of those goods they can themselves bestow, or those which they would like to best themselves, or those which fit with a preconceived picture of the life they want the object to lead. But divine gift love himself working in a man, is wholly disinterested and desires what is simply best for the beloved. Again, natural gift love is always directed to objects which the lover finds in some way intrinsically lovable. Objects to which affection or eros or a shared point of view attracts him, or failing that, to the grateful and the deserving, or perhaps to those whose helplessness is of a winning and appealing kind. But divine gift love in the man enables him to love what is not naturally lovable. Lepers, criminals, enemies, morons, the sulky, the superior, and the sneering. Finally, by a high paradox, God enables men to have a gift love towards himself. There is, of course, a sense in which no one can give to God anything which is not already his. And if it is already his, what have you given? But since it is only too obvious that we can withhold ourselves, our wills and hearts from God, we can, in that sense, also give them to him. What is his by right and would not exist for a moment if it ceased to be his, as the song is the singer's, he has nevertheless made ours in such a way that we can freely offer it back to him. Quote, our wills are ours to make them thine. And as all Christians know, there is another way of giving to God. Every stranger whom we feed or clothe is Christ. And this apparently is gift love to God, whether we know it or not. Love himself can work in those who know nothing of him. The sheep in the parable had no idea either of the God hidden in the prisoner whom they visited, or of the God hidden in themselves when they made the visit. That such a gift love comes by grace and should be called charity, everyone will agree. So, what he is talking about is, because we were created by this supernatural, all-powerful, all-loving being, we also have the capacity to freely give love to that which is not intrinsically lovable. That is what separates us from some of the other creatures. We can just love things freely, unconditionally. Other things can't do that. Dogs can't do that. Mice can't do that. We have this supernatural capacity. And so our lives should revolve around God because he created the universe through love. God didn't need to create the universe, but he decided to simply so that we could have life and so that he could perfect us and show us these cool things and make us better. Pretty frickin' sweet. He's responsible for implanting need loves and gift loves in us. And he's given us this supernatural ability to love others freely and unconditionally. What's also interesting is that Lewis says he also implants in us a kind of supernatural need love for him. This kind of need love which is distinct from the need loves that we express biologically, right? We have a need love for our parents, a need love for those who take care of us. In a different spiritual, existential way, we also have a need for God. According to some Christian mystics, God continuously sustains all that is living. It's not as if things are operating in an existence by their own accord. God literally is like powering everything. This love that God has given us, or this capacity, I should say, this divine gift love that we can exercise towards others, is a reflection of His love, and it is used to transform others and transform us. Thus, perhaps one of the reasons why we should orient our will with the will of God's is not only that He created us, not only that He loves us, but that doing so it is what's best for us, according to Lewis. God, being the wise and good parent that He is, according to Lewis, wants what's best for us. What would be best for us is to undergo some sort of radical spiritual transformation so that we may live and be with Him in perfect righteousness and goodness. Working within us through the Holy Spirit, He transforms our natures from sinful to righteous. This is not something that we can do ourselves, Lewis thinks. It's something that has to be done within us. Another example of the grace that God gives us. He transforms our reluctant need of God to childlike acceptance and total dependence on Him, which is completely contrary to the way that humans live and want to live, right? We don't want to need others. We don't want to have to rely on others. We want to be strong and independent. Well, what's interesting about allowing God's will and love to operate within us is that it transforms us to willingly, lovingly accept the dependence that we have on Him. And Lewis thinks that this is a good thing and that this is cool. By this transformation, we can cast off all these worries and anxieties that we have about how our life is going to turn out, about where we're going to end up. It gives us peace and security. I know you probably can't read this. Maybe you can. This kind of love that God has for us, that He allows to fill us up, also transforms how we view and treat other people. Our natural default state, Lewis says, is to love each other conditionally. Oh, I love you if you treat me nice. I love you if you're good to me. I love you if you do things for me. this love that God offers us, that we are called to embody and act out, transforms our conditional love of one another to gracious, unconditional love. Even though we are naturally unlovable creatures, even though there is something intrinsically broken and bad about us, we are still given the means, given the capacity to love each other fully and unconditionally, which is a beautiful thing. And he talks about this on pages 182 and 183. From the first full paragraph. How difficult it is to receive and to go on receiving from others a love that does not depend on our own attraction can be seen from an extreme case. Suppose yourself a man struck down shortly after marriage by an incurable disease, which may not kill you for many years. Useless, impotent, hideous, disgusting, dependent on your wife's earnings, impoverishing where you hope to enrich, impaired even in intellect and shaken by gusts of uncontrollable temper, full of unavoidable demands. And suppose your wife's care and pity to be inexhaustible. The man who can take this sweetly, who can receive all and give nothing without resentment, who can abstain even from those tiresome self-deprecations, which are really only a demand for petting and reassurance, is doing something which need love in its merely natural condition could not attain. No doubt such a wife will also be doing something beyond the reach of a natural gift love. But that is not the point at present. In such a case, to receive is harder and perhaps more blessed than to give. But what the extreme example illustrates is universal. We are all receiving charity. There is something in each of us that cannot be naturally loved. It is no one's fault if they do not so love it. Only the lovable can be naturally loved. You might as well ask people to like the taste of rotten bread or the sound of a mechanical drill. We can be forgiven and pitied and loved in spite of it with charity. No other way. All who have good parents, wives, husbands, or children may be sure that at some times they are receiving charity, are loved not because they are lovable, but because love himself is in those who love them. Thus, God, admitted to the human heart, transforms not only gift love, but need love. Not only our need love of him, but our need love of one another. So God allows us to freely and unconditionally love, despite the fact that we recognize that we suck. Everybody recognizes that we suck. But we can still love each other unconditionally. And isn't that awesome? Isn't that beautiful? We wouldn't be able to do that, Lewis thinks, if we were just natural creatures, things motivated by natural love. Something special is going on here. What grace does for us is that it perfects our natural loves over time. If we allow our natural loves to be guided by charity, to be limited by it, to be informed by it, our natural loves will become better, more pure, more perfect, and it may awaken within us a supernatural, appreciative love of God himself, which Lewis thinks is a cool thing. Yeah.
I think going back to when he was saying like it's way harder to receive the
Yeah.
I think the main reason for that is it takes a ton of humility. Like, take for example somebody who's like on work disability and like broke their back or something.
Yeah.
And it's like some strong guy who's done construction for 10 years. He never wants to take help because, he's been doing hard work all his life. It's really hard to say, I need you.
Right.
Like, he's expected to be strong his entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a certain pride that we all have. It's difficult to be humble. Maybe you just felt it in your own life. Like when somebody does something for you and you just feel awkward accepting it. You ever feel that? Why do you think that is? Why is that so hard?
We've been brainwashed on some level to only want to fight for ourselves, and like you're kind of a bitch if you take someone's help.
Yeah, it's seen as like a weakness, right? If you accept help or accept gifts, right? Is it maybe perhaps because deep down you don't believe you're deserving of it?
I think on some level.
What do you think? Or is that too scary and psychoanalytic?
I remember like there was one, like I was a camp counselor last summer, and we had like one off day, and I went to lunch with like one of my fellow counselors. Like, man, can I buy you lunch? I'm like, really? You want to do that? I was like, well, be my guest. But in my head, I'm like, man, this guy's kind of a sucker. But I think it kind of came down to like me thinking like, oh, I gotta pay for my own shit. Like, why should I be like taking this guy's help? Like, it's my responsibility. Like, I don't deserve to be like bought lunch by someone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So part of you did feel like you didn't deserve it or earn it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to this Christian idea that we all know that we're broken or imperfect deep down. Or no? Is that stupid? What do you think? Maybe it's wrong. I don't know.
I think it has something to do with just kind of like your view of yourself. Like if you, I don't know, I'm still working on myself. I ain't no perfect person. I probably don't have the best view of myself. So it's
Right. Yeah.
man, I don't know if I deserve to be bought lunch by this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the question?
We were talking about how difficult it can be to receive love
Yeah.
sometimes. Why is that? What Lewis seems to be implying here is humans seem to know or believe deep down that they are broken and unlovable. And so that makes it difficult for us to receive love sometimes more than it is to give it. You agree with that?
I agree with that. I think that you have to go through like a lot of like personal like discovery and like deep thought about yourself and like
Sure.
the kind of person you want to be and the kind of like things that you want to do or whatever. And like a rule that I live by is that people tell you who they are. Like,
Okay.
let's say you're talking to someone and they're like, yeah, I'm an asshole. You probably are an asshole. Or if someone's like, oh, I'm like a poor piece of shit and you don't like you shouldn't be around me, like you don't deserve me. Like that's probably true. You probably are a poor piece of shit and I probably don't deserve you. You know what I mean? And so I think that whenever we talk badly about ourselves or we say bad things about ourselves, we kind of reinforce that thought and that idea. And I think that's like whenever
Sure.
people talk about like manifestations or whatever, where they're like, I am great, I am kind, I am beautiful, or whatever, like it sounds silly, it sounds stupid. But the fact is like we believe the things that we affirm to ourselves, and if we affirm to ourselves that we are not worthy of being loved, then we kind of almost become someone who's not worthy of being loved. Because we think that of ourselves, we engage in behaviors of someone who isn't worthy of love. But if we see ourselves as someone who's worthy of love, then we act better, we act kinder, we act like someone, we want to be that thing that we see ourselves as, not on an egotistical level, but on like a true kind of level. You know what I mean? So
So there's a warning there, right? Lewis would say the proper understanding of yourself is that you realize that you are shitty and you are unlovable and you are in need of saving. But you don't want to like hammer that idea into yourself, right? Because then maybe you become shittier or more unlovable or mean or you pity yourself all the time and then nobody wants to be around you and yeah. So
I guess I kind of disagree with him a little bit.
Oh yeah. We have to be careful that we do not allow what we think and say to ourselves to override our potential for growth and development.
I think everybody can also kind of like smell that coming off of you.
Yeah.
How you perceive yourself. Everybody kind of knows it. But I think, like also like what you were saying, Sam, like it's all about like trying to create a vision of who you want to be and like striving to do that. And I think it's also going to determine like how you see yourself. Are you actively trying to pursue that and are you putting in the effort? And if you are, like, yeah, you're going to have a lot better view of yourself and you're not, like, then you know what you need to work on, you know what you need to do. But it's hard to like get to that point if you have a very low perspective of yourself.
Yeah, so that's a good statement. Let's wrap up what Lewis has to say. Let's characterize his view. His ultimate belief that he's trying to push in this chapter is this: all love is really an imperfect reflection of God and God's love for us. And so he's going to say, if you want to get better at loving, and if you want to become a better person, and if you want to have a more fulfilled life, you should work on becoming the best mirror that you can be for God's nature, will, and essence. Okay?
It's almost platonic.
It kind of is. Although he recognizes that there is this personal being that actually wants what's best for you. Whereas the forms in Platonism and Neoplatonism are like, they're not conscious like beings, right? But yeah, there is something about, especially the early Christian tradition, that is very Neoplatonic, for sure. And if you read the patriarchs, if you go into patristics, you'll see this. So how do we do that? How do we become a better mirror? How do we become better people? How do we love better? Well, if you take a more, philosophical or psychological view of what the Bible is trying to say, it involves a kind of death or a series of deaths. The central Christian message is this: to overgeneralize. There's something wrong with you. You're not all that you could be. If you want to become a better mirror of what is perfect, of what is loving, of what is true, good, and beautiful, you need to go through a series of deaths. The Bible talks about this as like one death In the Lutheran tradition, it has been described to me as drowning the old Adam within you, that sinful part of your nature that leads you astray. Maybe we don't have to get that violent with it. Maybe we could say something like, look, if you want to learn, if you want to grow, if you want to become a better lover, you have to be willing to let the bad parts of you die and to not resurrect them. You have to be willing to entertain different perspectives. You have to be willing to listen to what others have to say. You have to be willing to let those parts of you that are no longer serving you or others dissolve away. This is kind of what philosophy is all about. Philosophy, growing in knowledge and wisdom, is like a perpetual death. Sacrificing what is no longer truthful or of use to you so that something better and greater can rise from the ashes. So maybe we can summarize Lewis's view that way. For him, though, more specifically, what this looks like is particularly religious. The extent to which we will truly and fully love will be determined by our submission to God's will and the renunciation of what is sinful within us. That is what he's trying to get us to see. By ourselves, our growth, our ability to love is going to be stunted. We need some sort of transcendent ideal. Perhaps he describes it as a transcendent person, a transcendent force to flow through us. We need to channel that if we're going to be better people, better lovers, more wise, etc. So what do you all think? Is there some truth in here? Is it dumb? What's popping up for y'all? Do you like the way I described the first half of this? Well, right, yeah, because you're not gonna stab yourself.
But I think that it's a recurring motif in society that people who have never really struggled or have ever really been through a serious issue, they have a lower capacity to be sympathetic and to understand other people's struggles. Because when you actually go through something, it's a lot easier to get it. If you've never had your heart broken and your friend gets their heart broken, you'll be like, that sucks, but you don't feel for them on a major level. So I think that suffering produces character is a very good way to encompass that.
That's maybe the general Nietzschean psychological way of describing this.
I don't think that it necessarily means that you have to struggle or experience struggle in order to be a good person, but I do think that it helps you to love others in a more intense way, and to it gives you stronger conviction, when it comes to
Right. It helps you recontextualize, your life, your experiences. It gives you a more holistic worldview. If we wanted to get a little psychological or existential with it, perhaps we could say what the figure of Christ is trying to represent to us is this idea that self-sacrifice is necessary in some sense for salvation. Now, Christianity is going to say, that literally happens so that we can literally, our souls can be saved. But you can generalize that, right, into other domains.
I think sacrifice is also necessary to allow space for other things to enter your life. And
Sure.
To be able to actually pursue them fully. Just in a general sense, if you have distractions in your life and you decide, okay, I'm not going to bother with that anymore, it gives you more time to work on other stuff. And also, I think another general lesson is that you can't really learn without experiencing some level of pain.
Sure.
There has to be some struggle for it to stick with you.
I agree with that.
Makes sense. What do the rest of y'all have to say? Any thoughts, feelings popping up? Perhaps you don't agree with Lewis's metaphysics, right? That there is a God that created you, that loves you. Maybe you just don't agree with that. Yeah? You're like, it's a little,
I'm not personally religious, but I respect religion. I'm not one of those when I was in middle school, I was one of those dickhead atheists. You know what I mean? It's oh, you believe in God, you're such a fool, stupid. But as you grow and as you actually learn about religion, you see the value of it and how it can inspire people to do good things and to have more love for others.
Sure. I mean, you look at all the different charitable organizations and institutions in the U.S. The vast majority of them were started by Christians.
Yeah.
Salvation Army, Red Cross.
Yeah, that is very true. I think that.
So that that's good. Helping people's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's a very valid way to base your morality and to maybe use it as a jumping off point for the way that you love others and how to properly love others and properly love yourself. But I don't think that it is the way in which everyone should love, if that makes sense. You know what
Sure.
I mean? So that's why I don't fully agree with C.S. Lewis's view. Is that I think that it's a good view, but it's not one that I personally wholeheartedly align with, I guess.
I want to ask you one more question before we leave, because this is going to set up what we're going to talk about next time. Underlying kind of this whole Christian view of love is this presupposition that proper or pure or good love is it's oriented outwards towards other things, people, God, whatever. Unsurprisingly, people think, look, we have moral obligations to people. There are ways that we should treat people. There are ways that we should love them. We are called to be beholden to some objective standard of what's right and wrong, how to operate in our relationships, so on and so forth. The thinker we're going to look at on Wednesday doesn't agree with that at all. So, between now and then, I want you to think about, do we have moral obligations to other people? Do we have an obligation to love others? To love others in a particular way? Do we have some sort of obligation to treat others a certain way. That is proper love oriented outwards, or is it oriented inwards towards the self? Think about that. Hold that question in your mind as you read Wednesday's reading. Okay? All right. Final questions, concerns, comments? I'll let you have the last word.
Just on your last point, I think in order to love outwardly, you need to love inwardly first, and your love for yourself will ultimately pour out onto others.
Okay. Okay. I like that perspective.
I think it can go in multiple ways. I think that's a very simplistic view of it, because there's still like bad people who do good stuff for other people.
Sure.
But I don't know. I think
Maybe in some weird way, self-love is necessary for loving others.
I think it's definitely necessary for receiving it.
Okay. All right.